Welcome, everyone. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our success coaching training program. Thank you for joining our monthly CS Mastermind webcast, where we bring together professionals from across the customer experience ecosystem, from customer success managers to support specialists and everyone in between. Today's session on prioritizing high-impact CS activities is brought to you by Success Coaching, where we've helped more than 40,000 customer-facing professionals from almost 100 countries. Got to be careful how I say that. Develop the skills they need to excel. Whether you're in customer success support or any customer-facing role, you can find the right program for your learning style. A couple of quick notes. November is Career Development Month, so we're offering $100 off on our new value-based selling curriculum. Ashley's dropped more details into chat. Also, we'd love to hear what's top of mind for all of you these days. So please help us pick next year's webcast topics, or let us know if you'd be interested in being a panelist. Ashley's also dropped a link into chat to join our survey. Your input is important to us. You can find all the details of any of our offerings on our website, successcoaching.co. Now, CS Mastermind is all about real-world expertise, no theoretical frameworks or abstract concepts here. We dive deep into practical advice and actionable insights that you can apply immediately in your role. As I mentioned today, we're exploring how to identify the most effective activities that customer success managers should focus on for maximum impact. But some quick housekeeping items before we begin. We're recording this session and we'll share the replay next week. Please use the Q&A button for questions. The most upvoted ones will get priority during our discussion. LinkedIn Live viewers, feel free to post your questions directly in the comments. For smooth sailing, please keep the chat window for commentary only. Now, I'm excited to introduce our fantastic group of returning panelists who will be sharing their insights with us today. As usual, I'll let them introduce themselves to y'all in alphabetical order, and therefore we'll start with Chad.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew. So my name is Chad Horenfeldt. I'm the VP of Customer Success at Sienna AI, and Sienna is this empathic AI agent, and we have created this intellectual layer in AI for commerce. And what we essentially do is just help respond to customer tickets for B2C e-commerce. So it's a very busy time. And then we're expanding beyond that. And I've been in customer success for many years. I'm currently, my team is currently at the seed stage. It's a very early stage startup, but I've worked in companies of all different sizes. And I've recently wrote the book, The Strategic Customer Success Manager. So happy to be here, and yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. And once again, congrats on the book.
Thank you.
On to Cinthia.
Yes. Hey there. Cinthia Silva here. I've held client-facing roles on both sides of the customer journey in finance, tech, and fintech. I went from sitting on trading desks for banks in Seattle and New York to pivoting to tech. And I've worked at companies such as IHS Markit, Refinitiv, NASDAQ, and now as an account director at Global Relay, which is an e-coms surveillance and archiving solution. I'm a big believer in communities, which is why I'm active in and hold board member roles at CX Exchange, Latinos in Success, CS Middle East. And this year I've been I started hosting live events in New York City for the local customer success community. And I'll be doing the same moving into next year, because these, interactions I think are super valuable for everybody. And thanks for having me here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Cinthia. And, like I mentioned, I'm sorry that I missed the CS week in New York this year, but as I told John, I really want to make it next year, and potentially, I would be on a panel or something like that. Definitely interested in supporting the East Coast. And I got a whole slate of Northeasters here, so we're gonna finish things up with Patrice.
Hi everybody, Patrice Sawchuk. Really excited for today's session. I've been building and leading customer success functions, for the better part of 15, 20 years. I've had the pleasure of leading global success functions for some really incredible software companies throughout my career. After taking some time off to be with my family, and while I searched for my next CS leadership opportunity, I've started my own consulting practice, because topics just like the one we're about to discuss today are prevalent in our space. I've been helping companies strategize for their response to our ever-changing market, stand up digital and scale functions, and create AI strategies. So again, happy to be here today and really looking forward to contributing to this session.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrice. And Patrice hails from one of my favorite cities in the Northeast that I have a lot of family ties to out in Boston, with my father actually being born just outside Boston in Amesbury,
Awesome.
Massachusetts. So awesome. All right. Thanks all once again for making the time. Let's get this going. Today, we're going to challenge some sacred cows in customer success. So let me start with a bold statement. Most CSMs are wasting at least 40% of their time on activities that do not meaningfully impact customer outcomes or retention. And the data backs this up. Research shows that the average worker is productive, get this, for only 2 hours and 53 minutes each day. Okay? Not even 3 hours of your 8-hour workday. And employees spend 50.1% of their workday on tasks of little to no value. On top of that, my gardener's right outside my window again, on top with his blower. On top of that, employees are interrupted there's my interruption, 60 times per day on average, and it takes approximately 25 minutes to recover from each interruption. That's a productivity nightmare. We're not just busy, we're busy doing the wrong things. And here's the kicker. Many of those activities are things we've been told are essential to being a good CSM. We've built this mythology in customer success that good CSMs are available 24/7, that we respond to every customer message within minutes, that we attend every internal meeting we're invited to, that we meticulously log every interaction in the CRM, and that we treat every customer in our book of business with equal attention and care. We wear our responsiveness and our busyness like a badge of honor. And let's talk about that culture of busyness that's plaguing our profession. A recent study found that 58% of American workers say they're so busy with daily tasks that they lack time to consider anything but what's on their to-do list for today. And despite all this activity, only 20% of the average working day is spent on activities that actually matter, that actually move the needle. We're confusing motion with progress. But I'm going to argue that this approach is not only unsustainable, it's actually bad for your customers. The top challenge customer success leaders identified for 2024 was delivering value to customers, with scaling customer success ranking as the second biggest challenge. And here's a reality check. Nearly 70% of CS teams still don't have formal enablement programs. That means the majority of CSMs are figuring this out on their own, without any sort of structured support or training. While you're busy being busy, you're not doing the strategic, proactive work that actually drives long-term value. You're not having the tough conversations about adoption. You're not building success plans that align to business outcomes. You're not identifying risks before they become churn events. The truth is, not all customers deserve the same level of your attention. Not all requests are actually urgent. Not every meeting is required for you to attend, and some of the best practices that we've been taught are just keeping us on a hamster wheel. The CSMs who have the most impact aren't the ones doing the most. They're the ones doing the right things and having the courage to say no to everything else. I talk about this all the time in our training. You create your own time management nightmare. So today we're going to have an honest conversation about what really matters, what's just theater, and how to break free from the busy trap. I've got 3 CS leaders here who aren't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom and tell you what actually works, not just what sounds good in a LinkedIn post. So let's get uncomfortable. Let me put this out there. Most of what we've been taught about being a responsive and customer-centric CSM actually trains customers to be overly dependent and prevents them from becoming self-sufficient. First question, do you agree or disagree? And what's one commonly accepted customer success activity that you think is overrated or actively counterproductive?
Absolutely agree. I would love to jump in.
Yeah.
And I think probably the kind of most overused thing is our reoccurring check-in meetings with no agenda and no clear objective or success criteria. I think that happens all over the board. And I think that's a activity-based model versus an outcome-based model. And that just is busy. It's busy. It's not driving outcomes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, and also, like I think on to kind of build on that, it's one of those things, even if a meeting, a recurring meeting was useful, sooner or later, these meetings become stale. And it's time to to really assess those as a CSM. Like, again, if there's no agenda, then there's no point to the meeting. And I think it's okay to check in with your customer in that respect. I hate that word check in, but in that respect to say, hey, listen, do we need to look at this frequency? And as a leader, you need to be helping the CSMs look at that as well and not make that a metric of like, oh, you're not meeting with them 2.5 times a month or whatever.
I've actively pushed back against leaders who had that as a metric they were tracking.
Yeah.
Right.
I think on that one, like the better metric is, first of all, I'd say an effective meeting. Like what's a type of meeting that is going to actually drive impact, but more so, one would be like a lagging indicator like NRR, and then the second one would be more on, perhaps like some sort of value driven adoption metric, or are you capturing outcomes? But just to add to this, like, and maybe this is, I don't know, it's controversial, but the traditional thing we teach CSMs is to collect product feedback. But I would argue like that if you just collect product feedback and you just kind of do it without a filter, like that's another activity. It's a bit of a waste, and also sets wrong expectations, because you turn into this waiter type of persona where you just sort of accept whatever the customer is telling you in terms of, oh, you should build this really awesome, amazing cup holder that would be, so cool to have. But what is that actually driving, and what impact is that going to have? And a lot of the times the response is, oh, that's really interesting. All right, let me submit that to our product team, and we'll get back to you soon and see if we can get that on the roadmap, rather than qualifying that and really trying to understand, okay, so you've told me that your outcome is to achieve this. It could be to gain more efficiency, or to unlock additional automation that could lead to additional revenue. How is this particular thing that you've suggested going to achieve that? And how does that compare to this other feature that we've already discussed that's on our roadmap? So anyway, so that's just something
that's a great point, because what you're doing in that instance is you're elevating it from a tactical conversation to a strategic conversation, right? And the only way that we are going to deliver value at the level at which a customer says that I can't operate without this partner of mine is elevating the conversation from tactical to strategic. Here's how what we are doing for you is going to impact your bottom line.
Yeah, it's kind of going back to what Cinthia is saying. It's like, when you go in, a lot of times we go into these conversations, and the idea of a cadence or check-in meeting, like the idea of it is a good one, because you're having a touch with the customer and you can uncover potential issues. You can help them solution items they're trying to work through. But a lot of times, CSMs are so jammed because they have so many of these cadence meetings that they're not, adequately prepared for them. And then they just don't necessarily hit on the mark that you want them to.
Well, like Patrice, I'm sorry, go ahead, Patrice.
I was just going to say, I think unfortunately, this behavior is often driven by the way CSMs are measured in their organization. And so
to drive behavior, anybody?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I would encourage everybody today, right, to think about what is, like, how are you measured, and is it number of meetings, and are you encouraged to have these static reoccurring check-in meetings, and maybe kind of either challenging that if you're so brave to do that, or take a look at your own calendar and figure out if you are required to check off the box from an activity perspective. How can you make sure those meetings are purpose driven and outcome driven, and their purpose is to drive larger, corporate level objectives or metrics that your company is tracking?
Right. Or is their purpose just to keep you busy? I think we do them, and sometimes managers throw them out there and tie comp to it because they're afraid if we don't, we'll lose touch with our customers.
Yes.
Right. But think about it. If nothing's changed since last month, you're just creating noise.
Yep.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I've seen CSMs spend hours preparing decks for these meetings and customers barely engage.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. And
You're
Cinthia, you mentioned the importance of effectiveness. What's counterproductive is that it trains customers to wait for you to reach out to them rather than coming to you when they actually need help.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's another thing like along those points, and it's been like talked about a lot, like I mentioned in my book, around like the ineffectiveness of QBRs. So it's another type of engagement, and the idea of the QBR is great, but I think that we get too wrapped up in the slides, in what we think should be produced for that, rather than what the customer wants, and what will actually drive a valuable conversation. And so, just like you were saying, like preparing the slides. And I think that there's a lot of efficiencies now. We're actually experimenting with Gamma. We just bought like licenses for our team, and we've uploaded a template, our PowerPoint template, and we're starting to use Gamma for everything now. Like just very simple proposals that we want to send to a client. Like, here's a 60-day plan to get things back on track. And literally taking that plan, putting it into Gamma, and it creates this beautiful presentation. And so the focus is not the slides. The focus is the communication, what you're trying to achieve. And similarly with, business reviews, really want to focus on the conversation, the discussion, and what the customer is trying to get to, rather than try to get through your slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chad, I'm really glad you brought up QBRs too, because everyone loves to hate QBRs, but it's only because a lot of times it's us just talking at the customer. We're quoting the stats that we want to quote to them. We're talking about our roadmap and the things that we want to show them to potentially upsell them, et cetera. And we're not engaging them at all. And I think unfortunately, they're like when those situations happen, which happen often, it's not a great exchange. But that's why like the QBR and EBR, pick a BR or whatever, should be interactive, right? It shouldn't be this big surprise and unveiling. It should be like, here's the deck we put together. What do you want to see? Add some slides that you want to talk about your business and the things so that we can customize it. I don't think there's enough of that goes on.
No one wants to get on a call and be read the news, right? Like, I don't want to sit there and listen to you read the news to me. So, you have, in order to plan forward, you got to look back a little, right? So there has to be some, here are the things we did, but you need to be, co-creating these QBRs together. What does the customer want to be doing? How can you strategically plan together for your partnership?
You also need to be reminding them of the value that they're getting.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's not the tactical value, the strategic value. Once again, strategic.
Yeah. So in my book, it's funny. I throw out the word review because I think of review as like, I don't know if everyone remembers, like you did a book review as a kid and you'd stand up in front of the class and everybody would just like tune out and it'd be so boring, and nobody likes like a book review going like you want. And in fact, like what you're trying to do is to come out of the meeting with a plan, at least a few, like 2 or 3 things that you want to accomplish. And so it's more forward thinking. And so to your point, Andrew, it's like only really 20% should be a look back. And I've kind of renamed it strategic checkpoint, which came out of a previous company I was in. Someone on my team came up with that. And then we just loved the term. And we actually saw a 40% increase in decision maker, like executive stakeholders that would attend, because we would frame it up like a board meeting. And if you ever attended a board meeting is essentially just what you were saying, Patrice, where I think you said where you give the information ahead of time. There's a pre-read, and then there's discussion questions that come out of that pre-read, or you're kind of a pre-discussion, and then you come in and everyone's read the materials, and there's a few slides. The rest are in the appendix, and there's discussion questions, like an open discussion, and that way the focus is more on, okay, what do we do next? There's a bit of a look back, but it's like, what do we do next? Like there's
an anchor, right? Okay, here's what we did up until now. Now let's talk about, okay, what the next, because you're right. The board meetings they're very much 20%. What did we do last quarter? Okay, where are we going to go now with what we've done based on what we've done?
And here's a problem that we've seen in this data that you send. we have to focus on. Like, I didn't know about that. This is really interesting. Let's talk more about that. And that really engages people. Like when you're on a meeting and, video goes off, people are on mute, there's a problem. Like you've kind of lost your stakeholders there, and you probably won't get them back the next time you want to schedule a meeting with them. And so the way you have to think about it is, with everyone being so busy, there's so many vendors that companies are working with. That's your one chance. It's like I like to call it like your World Series, your World Cup, your Stanley Cup, whatever it is. That's the game, the moment that you really have to shine, and you have to be prepared, and it has to be engaging. And it comes down to your preparation, but it also comes down, I think, something Cinthia you had mentioned, like just not a rudimentary discussion, but coming with prepared questions that are really going to get your customers to think. Maybe some pieces of information that you know about their business. You've done a little bit of research. You can use AI obviously to do that, and you come back and say, like, okay, like this is what I've heard, this is what I've seen. Just kind of curious, knowing that these are your priorities, your outcomes we discussed. Have you thought about this as something that's important? And just getting them to
you constantly need to be asking the why. Why are you doing business with us? Why is this important? Has anything changed? And you know what? Business reviews, I found some really interesting statistics about business reviews because this is where things really get interesting. Recent research revealed that 88% of buyers state that suppliers aren't demonstrating enough evidence of value and innovation in business reviews, and 60% believe suppliers are getting by on delivering the bare minimum. So it's not landing, folks, right? So you're going to spend your time doing this stuff. It needs to land. 82% of buyers have canceled a contract because they felt their supplier didn't deliver enough value and innovation. This is why we came up with the value-based selling course. And the foundation of this is all about making sure that the customer understands the value. And that's demonstrated in things like business reviews. So, okay.
But they don't have to be business reviews.
They don't. I like the way you positioned it. Business reviews, the term business review was hijacked back from in the on-prem days. We used to refer to quarterly business reviews, but they were very much looking forward reviews. Do you remember those? Right. And it would be an internal thing where we would get together. It would be post-sales and sales getting together on a quarterly basis. Okay, here's our plan. Right. And we looked at it as, here's our review for the business that we're going to get this next quarter.
But it also doesn't have to be a meeting either, right? It doesn't like showing that value. This is where, going back to the original question, like, the overused thing, this is where, where the more creativity and creative approaches in customer success are starting to emerge more and more.
Yeah.
Oh, Chad, I'm really glad you brought that up because I think that makes me, because you touched on AI before, and I know we're going to talk about it, but later too. But like we know that customer success is typically like under-resourced, and Andrew, you talked about it in your intro, right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of get this, what I call the sales leftovers. But one of the sneaky ways, if you don't have any tools, like to kind of upskill yourself or get some like maybe some strategic points is if you have if you record a meeting, because it's easy to get those note takers in your meetings, you could take that and do it yourself. Into like ChatGPT or something, and say, hey, what are some of the strategic points I missed? You know what I mean? To make yourself better, to kind of like teach yourself. And then also based on this customer's business, this is their role. This is a conversation we had. What things can I think about going forward? And I know there's tools that are available that supposedly do that, but a lot of CSMs aren't getting those tools. But that's a way that you can actually upskill yourself and then be more strategic and ask better questions. Because Chad, you're absolutely right. The minute you start like really boring your audience, they don't come back, especially the key stakeholders, because they're very, very busy.
Yeah,
100%. These people are people who need to look at things. Look at their business a mile wide and an inch deep. They do not have time to go down freaking rat holes with you, right? And it's what's interesting. We touched on communication a few times there. Recent research shows that knowledge workers invest 88% of their entire work week into communication, managing emails, attending meetings, team chat apps, and here's the kicker: they're losing 19 hours a week just on written communication alone. 19 hours, right? That's almost half the standard work week. So building on all of this, let's talk about availability. There's this expectation that CSM should be constantly accessible. But doesn't that just create learned helplessness in our customers? What boundaries have you set around availability, and how do you train your customers to respect them without damaging the relationship? I mean, something that I am constantly reminding my folks to do is if it's not a critical response, do you really need to respond to that customer 15 minutes after they sent you an email? Right? I mean, if you do it every once in a while, that's okay, but you're doing it all the time, and you're conditioning them to a 15-minute response when our SLA is clearly documented in one business day.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I don't know any customer that really knows an SLA, and I mean, it's just not there. So I don't think, it's top of mind. I mean, maybe if they email you or message you a lot, then you remind them. It's interesting. Like, one thing we do here that's a bit unique is that I'd say over 90% of our customers interact with us through Slack. And a lot of people that, joined our CS organization are like, wait a minute, what? Slack? I don't know. That's a little scary. And what's really good about it is that our support is driven through the same mechanism. So each of our clients have their own Slack channel. And what's cool about it is that every message that comes in from our customers goes into our help desk. And so, like, our support team is kind of like the backup. Like, everything is documented. And so the customers know that. And so they know, and they know that nothing's going to get lost. So I think that's one thing, is like, whatever thing you have, just reassuring your customer that, like, hey, these messages will get back and there will be some sort of response. The other thing that we have is we use Sienna. So we use our own technology as a first response. So it's an AI response, and it will handle all basic questions and advanced questions now. And so that we can actually respond and deflect things, right away. And so that's an interesting and, I'd say, newer type of approach. But I think ultimately it's setting the right expectations, and sometimes resetting them, and not feeling that you need to respond right away.
Yeah, it has to be. And you may know the response. All you got to do is set it up to send later. Every email program these days has a send later function. It's that simple. You can respond to it. Just send it later. Send it in 12 hours. Send it tomorrow, same time. Right? Just don't. You're creating your own problem. I'm 90% of your customers engage via Slack. I think for where you're at in the evolution of your company, that works for you. I think that you get too big. That's just not. I don't see how that's sustainable personally. But if that works for you,
it's a whole other, I'd say, discussion. But it just because it's in Slack doesn't mean you're responding right away. And also because we have Sienna, and we call it her, Sienna responds. We have it set up. There's thinking time, we call it. It's not automatic, so it doesn't seem too fake, but she responds within a few minutes, and she typically has a really great response. And then if not, she routes it automatically. So, it's all about setting those expectations. And so I think we've done well. But to other people in the point, making notes in the Slack channel or in our own chat here, listen, you have to, has to be properly administered for it to work well.
Yeah, I think you have, everyone should strive to create self-sufficiency in their customers. Like, I think the world is changing too. I mean, you're always going to have those customers that want to pick up the phone and call you, but I want to be self-sufficient. I don't want to have to wait for you to respond or get off a call, right? And so I think, to Chad's point, setting really clear expectations, holding the boundary is super important, right? And so finding a talk track that's authentic to you, that makes you comfortable to say, like, as I shared with you before, here are my roles and responsibilities. Here's how you can find this information. I think the other piece is, if you're measuring your worth or your value to how responsive you are to your customers, it's kind of back to that, like, activity tracking, right? And so, your intellectual knowledge is capital there. And so I think it's super important to make sure that you're not measuring your value to your customers by being their Google. It's just not sustainable.
That's a good point too, because I think it's like the difference between customer success and customer service 2.0. Because a lot of times those questions that customers that email you that you can answer quickly are probably customer service questions. And so like you have to sort of discipline yourself as well as a CSM to say, okay, I'm going to forward this, or I'm going to either respond to the customer, or I'm going to forward this to like this our service desk, copy them, and then I'm going to say, hey, listen, you need to send these types of requests to service desk so that we can log them, and we have a process in place. Feel free to copy me if you want me to be aware. But those are part of like boundary setting, and again, making your time freed up for better conversations. And this just brings me to like your calendar in general. Like I really do. I'm a huge believer in, blocking time blocking for deep work. Because, if you just turn off the notifications and you can do, it's even just an hour a day, it's amazing. If you took an hour to look at some of your accounts, even just one account, if it's a critical account, you can get more done and make more of an impact within that space than answering a bunch of, customer service type questions throughout the day.
Yeah. One thing that you just said, Cinthia, that's really, really important, or it made me think about it, is that the question is like sometimes to ask yourself is, well, why are customers coming to you? Why aren't they going to support? And so a lot of times, when people are coming to you, you're like, oh, I have to train the customer to go to support. But I remember Christy Falteroso, she said something really important. Sometimes you have to lean into this and try and find out, ask the customer, well, why are you going to the CSM? And a lot of the times is that it could be the response time of support. It could be that maybe they had a bad experience with support. And, this is where, going back and thinking about how you can better leverage AI, because, to everyone's point, like it's about getting to the answer and getting to the solution. And this is where if you can provide a better automated response or just improving your support, then this also then saves, the CSM from, getting those particular questions. And then on the flip side, kind of talking about prioritization, like as a CSM, it's very easy to gravitate towards the thing that's burning the most, or the warmest, or whatever. It's the house that's burning down. Because it's easy. It's like, oh, that's burning. I'm gonna go get that. I want to go focus on that. But I'd say what's harder is that when you get up in the morning and you ask yourself, and you probably do a little bit of analysis looking at your accounts and your priorities and say, what's the one thing that's going to help me the most today to drive towards my goals? And thinking about what that is, and then setting time in your calendar and making sure you have time allotted to that. So it could be maybe reviewing your accounts, looking at the data that you have and saying, okay, this is a particular client I haven't talked to in a while. Let me just take a quick review and see what's going on there based on their health score. There's maybe a potential issue. Or I have to prepare for this particular meeting. This is what I'm going to do because there's an upsell opportunity and they've told me that they really want to look at this. So it's just being very, just taking that first step and rather than letting work come at you, because work will come at you. And the last thing is that sometimes it's okay to let things kind of fall. Like customers maybe they're escalating something to you that is also with support. Let them go and let support do their job. And that's a hard thing for a CSM because they feel like they're compelled to respond. But let other groups do their stuff. You need to do what you need to do. And if it escalates, then the odd time it will escalate. But it's better to do that than to be kind of running around and not adhering to those things that are the most important, that are going to drive the most impact for you and the company.
I love what Patrice said about not being there at Google, and Cinthia, your point about reinforcing kind of proper workflow to set boundaries, and what Chad just said about understanding why customers are reaching out. And I think it really, really highlights how we've confused responsiveness with effectiveness.
Yeah.
And the point that Chad just made, the importance of resetting expectations. Stop being compelled to respond. And once again, this is about you, right? You control your calendar. You control your schedule. Your busyness that's driving you crazy is 90% of that's a product of you letting that busyness get in there.
Right.
But this is where it gets interesting. When we do set boundaries and we step back from being constantly available, we're told to rely on our data and our health scores to tell us where to focus our limited time. That's the promise, right? Let the data guide your prioritization. But I want to challenge the assumption with some data, right? According to a recent TSIA report, only 30% of companies actually adjust their health scores based on changing business conditions. They said it and they forget it. I think it's a freaking Ronco oven, right? And what that means, there you see, Cinthia knows what I'm telling you. She's watched late night TV before. That means 70% of companies might be making decisions based on metrics that are outdated or no longer relevant to their current reality, which is why we always talk about how important it is to constantly be reviewing and updating your health score data. So here's my hot take. We spend enormous amounts of time on health scores and dashboards, but how often do those metrics actually predict churn better than just having a real conversation with your customer? Are we over-engineering prioritization, what gut instinct and relationship intelligence might be more reliable?
I think it's I think it's a both scenario, right? Like, I think in this day and age, especially with the pressure to scale, and depending on your company, you could have a super long tail business. It's really difficult, I think, to operate a modern success organization without health scoring capability. If I were, as part of my consulting practice, that would be one of the first recommendations I would make. However, to your point, Andrew, it absolutely needs to be current, dynamic, valid, whether you've got an incredible analytics team, in-house and you build it in-house, or there are amazing vendors out there that do a great job with health scoring. I've worked with many of them. And so I will say, the other piece of it is you have to then, with your data team, go back and check the model. And so look at your churn data and look at your health score predictability and see where it fell short. The goal is to get as predictive as possible. I think, to answer kind of your underlying question, Andrew, it does not remove the need for the human element. That's our job. That's our function. We know our customers. We're not, a data model. And so I think the force multiplier here is combining those two things. So you have a dynamic, accurate, predictive health scoring model, and then you have CSMs who know their customers, and they need to, use their judgment when to jump into a customer and why, based on what they're seeing and they know of their book.
Well, I want to add one more thing to that. I'm sorry, Cinthia. I want to add one more thing to what Patrice just said, that the additional force multiplier is not just the CSM showing up, but showing up with the right message, with the right data, with the right narrative.
Yes.
Right. So once again, back to what we led with. Make sure that the conversations that you are having are strategic, not tactical, right? Because that's just a waste of everybody's time. Sorry, Cinthia, go on.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Here's my challenge with health scores. They're absolutely necessary. But what we do often is we treat health scores in the same way that we treat engagement strategies with customers. If we're not doing a segmentation analysis and looking at how to engage with and or how to, the health scores, they're wildly different. So like one common metric for the health score is tickets, right? How many tickets are they putting in? So if an enterprise customer with 10,000 employees puts in 50 tickets in a month, that might be low. But if like a mid-market puts in 50 a month, that's a red flag.
That's a problem.
So if you've got health scores that are exactly the same, no good.
Now, you got to normalize it for what cohorting, I think, is really powerful there.
You need to be smart about it. Chad, anything to add?
No, I think that what I've seen with health scores is they can be very effective when they're tied to value. So if you see a customer that's underperforming, and to Cynthia's point, it's best to have it different from different segments, different products. But when you can tie it to a value and you see, okay, this customer is underperforming, it can help you prioritize where you need to focus on. The problem is that you can't become overly reliant on it, especially for higher, segment like enterprise type customers, because a lot of that is based on the characters, the stakeholders that are there. And you could have something that looks green and a new stakeholder comes in, or a stakeholder you didn't know about because you didn't map it properly comes in, so said, we're just doing everything differently here. And then you can find yourself on the street. So that's
Watermelon. We call that the watermelon account. Green on the outside, red on the inside. And you have no freaking clue unless you are sitting in there. You were sitting in the meeting room hearing the decisions being made.
Well, even if you're in the room, the challenge that, and this is something that, kind of talk about a lot in the book, is that a lot of the CSMs are not necessarily trained on how to conduct themselves when they're in the room with those key stakeholders. What are the questions that you need to ask, and how do you actually get to the underlying issues? Going back to the original question that was asked, like one of the things that we do that I'd say that we're being asked to do, and it's not necessarily that impactful, is that we're asked to talk about, the new features. Oh, we've got these great new features that were launched. And that's great. Like, and that's important to do that. And it's fun, it's exciting, especially if they're really cool. We have some neat new features, but if they're not tied to their business or what
if they're not relevant, what's the point? You're just wasting. Yeah.
Yeah. You're just wasting time. And so it's a similar thing when you're coming into a meeting with a stakeholder and you have no idea like how to conduct yourself, how to ask questions that are going to be impactful, how to influence this person in the right direction. Then you're kind of just throwing your CSMs into like the lion's den and hoping for the best. And then the customer turns and you're like, well, you met with them. What happened? Like, what's going on there? Health score looks green. You've been giving these great, pulse checks. And then meanwhile, they're still churning.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Chad, I really love that because you touched on like two things that always resonate with me. Due diligence before calls with your customers and discovery, the power of discovery. And that's not limited just to sales because I think that's where like everybody buckets discovery. That should happen across the customer journey. And that's exactly what you're talking about in terms of the differentiation. These very light questions. Everything good? Good. No, you need to dig a little deeper. And if you've done due diligence, you know what they've done in the past, maybe a little bit about their business and you're asking deeper questions and maybe uncomfortable questions.
That literally identifying, communicating value, and having good discovery meetings is literally, it's like a quarter of the value-based selling. It is the cornerstone, literal cornerstone of driving retention and expansion. And what's and whether you're using health scores, you're using gut instinct, you're using a combination, we're constantly told that we need to be proactive. We need to schedule regular check-ins, right? Sending in those check-in emails, the QBRs, because that's what good CSMs do. But what's interesting is that, and I mentioned this before, research found that 88% of buyers say suppliers aren't demonstrating enough value and innovation in those business reviews, right? And you know what it is? They're not tying the feature function tactical shit to something strategic. Why should I care about this? 88%. And 60% believe their suppliers are just getting by on delivering the bare minimum. What's even more concerning, though, is that 82% of buyers have canceled a contract because they felt the supplier didn't deliver enough value. And they may have delivered the value. They may have delivered the value that they promised.
Yeah.
Right? But we've done a shitty job connecting that, for helping them understand the value that they're getting, and then making that value transportable, right? Creating a narrative around that value so that they can explain the value that they're getting to other people in the organization. Because guess what, folks? Decisions aren't made by a single person unless you're in the S of the SMB, right? Unless you are the S of the SMB, a decision is being made by a cohort of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Including somebody in finance who at the end of the day just wants to understand what the ROI is. Yeah. And if you have not articulated a strong ROI case and you haven't been able to create a story that they can then tell others within the organization, you will be part of the 82%.
Yeah, it's a good point. A couple things. Like one is showing like there's different ways to show value. And so a lot of the times, your customers, and especially if you're working with your day-to-day, they won't even have thought about value and communicating that up. And so you can come up, this gives you an opportunity to actually create the narrative. So one of the things that we've done is we've created an ROI calculator, and it takes in a few inputs. It's pretty simple, the first iteration. And if they want to go deeper, we can do a deeper one. But just by doing a very simple, like showing them the math and showing them, well, here's how much money you're saving, it's really impactful. They're like, oh, I didn't really think about that. And then you're like, okay, well, how are you going to use this? Like, how can we use this to communicate to the right people? Who should receive this? So that's a good question to ask. Who would feel left out if we didn't send this to them? So it's another way of phrasing it. And so that way you can unlock additional stakeholders that you may not have known about. So that's on one thing. And just one other thing, like going back to that original question of things that we shouldn't do. So a lot of times our leaders will say, save every account at any cost. And I think that one of the worst metrics, this is probably controversial, is like a logo retention metric. And the reason is that, especially like depending on the stage, right? If you're late stage and you've got like all enterprise clients, logo retention is really important. You can't lose a client. But I would say that like, GRR net retention, like a dollar amount is more important because there are some clients that it's not worth spending your time on. You're not going to save them. They're not the right fit. And sometimes they were the right fit and they've changed and they're no longer the right fit. And so that's where it's really hard for the CSM, going back to like handling support tickets and like responding. Like you have this hero mentality and you have to take off the superhero costume. You have to like take that off. You're not the superhero. You have an organization, you have particular goals, and that's part of the problem. All right, Andrew is okay. This is going in a different direction, this webinar.
I love that. Yeah, it's true. It's it. Yeah, you nailed it.
It took me a long time to actually not feel as guilty when I lost a client as a leader as well.
Yeah.
It is okay at times.
And if we're working on nurturing and growing our customers who really are a good fit for us, then that revenue will offset, right?
Yeah.
Like, because you will spend more money trying to retain an unhappy customer or a customer that is a bad fit than if you were to pivot and work on nurturing and growing your existing customers that are a good fit.
Yes.
Awesome. You know what? It's already, wow, it's already 10 to noon. I knew this was going to be a good conversation. And we only got through half the questions that we had developed, but we got about a half dozen questions in the Q&A. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to turn to those now. If you have questions that you would like to serve up to the panelists, please add those to the Q&A or use that little thumbs up button to upvote questions that you want to get answered. Just a reminder, we do go until a quarter past the hour, so we will answer as many questions as we can get through over the next 25 minutes. I'm going to ask that my guests take a look at those questions. I see Patrice has already volunteered to jump in on the first one, but if there's something, Cinthia, Chad, that jumps out at you, that you've got something to jump in on first, go ahead and hit that answer live button, and I will call on you first. So let's get started with M. Gwynn. M. Gwynn, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the question. M. Gwynn asks, what would you all suggest is a better metric to track than the number of meetings with customers? I love this, Patrice, because I think you were the one that brought up right out of the gate there's a difference between activity-based and outcome-based.
Yeah. So I think meeting, or maybe I'll take the word meeting out of it, right? Engaging with your customer is table stakes, right? Like as a CS leader, I expect you are engaging with your book. And now depending on segmentation and the tools that you have, that looks a little different, whether it's meetings and digital and all that type of stuff, right? So I'm not looking to measure how many meetings or what types of meetings you had, because that's my expectation, right? That's what you're doing. You're engaging with your customers. I think if you are building these engagement moments intentionally around driving outcomes and ideally customer outcomes, right? So customer wants to do X, Y, and Z, and your solution is the vehicle to do those things, right? They're solving business problems. And the more strategic a business problem you can get, the more strategic a stakeholder you'll get. And so if you measure those outcomes and you track the data that's measuring those outcomes, so like capture the outcomes somewhere, right? Customer wants to do X, Y, and Z. So I think the first thing I've done in some places is you're required to document and capture customer outcomes, part of success planning or however you want to go about it, right? Everybody needs some outcomes captured. And then the indicators that your meetings are effective or your engagement with your customers are effective and that you're meeting with them enough is the measurement of the customer achieving those outcomes, right? Also, are your customers staying with us? Are they growing with us? Are they using product? Is their sentiment high, right? All those kind of traditional customer success metrics will skew in your favor if when you meet with them, your meetings are structured and intentional around outcomes and value.
And I love that. I think you need to go that, and then you got to take that next step. Okay, well, what does the customer doing X, Y, and Z mean?
Right.
Right. So if you're talking to them at the user level, then what does that mean to the middle management? If you're talking to them at the middle management level, and this is where the as I've used the term before, black swans, right, from Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss. What though you discover those black swans once you understand, well, what does that mean at the middle management layer? Because that's going to give me, a window into strategically how is what we do having an effect on the organization. And then you want entry into the C-suite.
Right.
And you can start building a narrative around here's how what we're doing over here is helping you CXO achieve your desired outcome, which is implementing the strategy and what you're likely being comped on.
Absolutely.
So I love that you brought that about the different stakeholders, Andrew, because
Different
you're absolutely
levels.
right. The hidden thing about the C-suite is they want to know what they don't know. So any sort of market intelligence that you can bring them, that is what they're going to value versus what others are going to value. If you talk to them about like, hey, we got this new feature, they're like they'll just send you down to somebody like a user or some middle manager, right? But here's a sneaky metric that I would also measure, and I think it's a tricky one. It's measuring the amount of like super users, advocates, and champions you have at each account, particularly in the enterprise space. Because we know if we have one champion and they leave, you are so vulnerable to churn, right? And so I think if you start measuring those, and we know that those are at different levels, right? A super user versus like a C-suite advocate versus, a champion that might be middle of the road or senior. But the more you have, and I think it's relevant across all types of businesses, small to large, but it's most relevant in mid to large size companies.
I think you got to do a quantity and quality thing.
Yes.
Yeah, we're starting to do that now at the more enterprise. So it's more of not just the quantity, although quantity is important. Like making sure you have, especially the larger accounts. Like, are you covered where someone leaves that you still have further connection? But the quality of the relationship is important as well. So like how strong is the relationship? Is it a new person? Set that person to a weak relationship unless somebody knows them. So we always look for like common connections, and then we look to connect with that particular person. But what I would say, like, there's a question, I think it's from Mary, and she asks, like, how do you handle situations where you're consistently restating boundaries and resetting expectations with clients? And I definitely think that the different levels of stakeholders is important. So, for example, a lot of the times what I find is that we instruct customers to follow a certain process when submitting, let's say, support-related issues. And a lot of times those aren't necessarily followed. So the first thing I would do is like try and ask, well, why? Like, why is that not being followed? What's the question? What are the challenges? Also, just re-emphasizing the why, like why we need you to follow this process. Well, if you follow this process, we'll be more efficient. We'll make sure that we process your particular request and that we understand there's not as much back and forth. And so you'll get what you need, and then we'll be able to deliver on what it is that you want. But sometimes that stuff doesn't work. And so like getting back to the decision maker and talking to the decision maker about benchmarks and trends and inside information, a lot of times they want to understand like how is their team operating. And so if you've built a trusted relationship with them, then you can, almost operate on a level where you can give them guidance and say, this organization is running fairly effectively. But here's kind of what I've seen these other organizations in terms of how they're structured or how they operate and how we work really well with other organizations. Unfortunately, we're not necessarily seeing that level of cooperation. And here's kind of what we need from you. Like, how does that sound? So these are just, you have to be very delicate. And if you have it, again, you have to build trust. But these are some ways that you can kind of get around those situations. But definitely not easy, Mary. So it's part of our job, unfortunately.
Patrice, I think you had some want to weigh on Mary's question as well. Let me restate it. Any recommendations for how to handle situations where you're constantly restating boundaries and resetting expectations with clients?
Yeah, I think anytime you can reinforce in writing, that helps too. If it's, in a call, it can get misinterpreted or forgotten. So I think anytime you can reinforce expectations in writing, any way you can tie it to like the way it benefits them, right? And so like a talk track I've used in the past is, hey, so that you don't have to wait for me to get back to you, or if I'm out of the office and I can't get back to you, or if this is time sensitive, this is the process we have in place. And then just make sure they're educated on what the alternatives are. Like, are there office hours? Is there a knowledge base? Is there a chat bot? And kind of play up why that benefits them, why they might get the answer faster. And I think just be super consistent. Like as soon as you waver from that, it's like kind of, training an animal or raising children or like consistency.
It's all about training.
You've got to change the behavior. Yeah.
You got to reiterate it constantly, right?
Yeah.
The only way you're going to change, and you know what? They're not necessarily they're not going to follow through the first time. Right. So you need to expect that and just keep reminding them.
Well, another thing about managing expectations, because I do think it's tough sometimes. Like it seems like every massive problem is funneled to the CSM, right? Like, because it's like like the everything department, right?
Exactly,
Who wrote that article?
The everything department. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And so one of the ways that I think that is like another maybe sneaky way or around like maybe ways to kind of like, set better expectations is by maybe developing better internal partnerships. Because if you like, and because earlier, Chad, you brought up rightly so about like, customers talking about like certain feature requests, and then you're trying to get more strategic about why they want that. But we know feature requests often die on the vine because our product team has their own objectives. And this, even if it's a good idea, it might not work. And so if you can set better expectations, sometimes that's just by having a better, relationship with the product. First of all, never promise a customer anything because that's the only thing they remember. But if you have a great relationship with product marketing, sales, and whoever other customer service, then you can actually say realistically, what should I say in these circumstances? Or this is what's happened. What realistically should I like? Tell me the truth. Don't tell, let's work together. How can we work towards something like this? Building those internal relationships, because what I've seen in so many companies is these fiefdoms where in certain instances people, teams not only just work in silos, but sometimes they actively work against each other, which is insanity because the customer loses.
Well,
so as the CSM, if you build those relationships, you can set better expectations.
Well, and also go beyond that, and with product in particular, I also find that customer success managers aren't telling the right story in the right way to product, right? Are you just asking for a feature? Or are you explaining the business case? Are you explaining what percentage of customers are affected? What is the and the most important thing is attaching a revenue number to it, right?
Yes.
There is this potential revenue at risk or this potential upside. Okay, because at the end of the day, I don't care if they got a freaking fiefdom and they're doing everything into a in a vacuum. At the end of the day, when the C-suite at your company learns that product is avoiding something that is either high revenue risk or high revenue potential, money cures all ills, right? So make sure that you're communicating with product in the right way. That's how you're going to be effective working with them. Patrice, can you hit the done button on both those for me? Let's move on to the next. Move on to the next question here. And as we just passed the top of the hour, just a reminder, we will be we're going to keep going here for another few minutes. So if you can stick around with us. Okay, we got somebody from LinkedIn Live, Marcelo. asks, when having monthly and annual subscribers, how would you prioritize or schedule check-ins accordingly? Uh, by the way, if you use the term check-in internally, great. If you actually use the term check-in when you're communicating with your customers, stop now. Okay. What 3 questions should I ask myself in order to strategically automate check-ins with my customers?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is like I'd like to know what's the monthly recurring revenue. So how much is this customer paying you? Because if they're only paying you like a little bit amount, like I wouldn't check in with them at all. Like because it's not worth it. It's just you don't have time. Um, but let's assume that they're out of a significant amount, and you're asking like who should I check in with? So yeah, I would look at depending on the life cycle, like where they are in the life cycle. Let's say they're earlier on in the life cycle and maybe they haven't hit you have certain thresholds, things that you want to see happen in those journeys. So I would have something set up to look for those customers who haven't achieved whatever success metrics you want to see, and then go in to help those particular customers. More advanced systems, you may have collected what their outcomes are, and you can tie whatever their outcomes are to whatever they're actually achieving. And if there's a gap there, then that's kind of where you want to jump in. You may have regular elements in your customer journey where at this point of the journey that maybe you do like we do like audits for our customers. We go in like a 10-point inspection and we're trying to automate that audit. And then we can go and say, hey, we've set up this audit for you. We would like to go through this with you, our results. How does that sound? And you make it easy for them. Or you send them a video and you see how engaged they are in that video. So there's just different things that you can do. But you want to think through the journey, think through the stage of the journey. Start small, try a few different things, experiment, and go from there and build on that. So that's what I would recommend.
So yeah, love that. Account segmentation is supposed to help us prioritize, but I'd argue that most companies don't have the courage to actually execute on it. Right? Is segmentation just a theory that doesn't work in practice, or are we implementing it wrong? Right? Because if it's hard to execute, and we're all stretched thin, the solution we're being sold is automation and digital customer success, right? That promise is compelling. Automate the routine stuff. Free up CS time for high-value strategic work. And AI and automation is going to save us all. I think they're definitely.
Yeah, but as a CSM, right? Yeah, but as a CSM, you can actually segment your own book of business, right? Like, because sometimes the way these book of businesses are done is like doesn't make a lot of sense. And even if it does, because so many times like segmentation is about like contract value, and we know that like the industries can use your tools in different ways. So I think segmentation, I'll die on that hill that it's a worthy exercise. But you're right. Is it done throughout? I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily implemented across businesses.
I don't think it's done well at the organization level, but you bring up a great point. It's something that we teach about segmenting your own book of business. Just because your company isn't segmenting or isn't segmenting right doesn't mean that you, as the individual CSM, shouldn't segment your book of business.
Yeah, it's very similar to like, I was just going to say, it's very similar to like relying on a health score versus like CS sentiment. So I think look at your book, understand how you're measured and what success will look like in your book. And from there, and it's not, again, like a health score, it's not a set it and forget it. Your customers, they change, they mature, they go through their own life cycles. And so you have to constantly be looking at your book and like, where do you need to lean in? Who needs extra TLC? Who's happy and sleepy? And that's okay for a little while. And so like you classify your own customers based on what you understand they need from you.
Well, and that's constantly changing.
Yes.
Right? What was a desired outcome 6 months ago? Okay, we hit that. All right, well, what's next? Okay, now we need to adjust the way we're looking at our customers so that we can make sure that we're measuring, the effectiveness and the return on investment for the thing that's next. Right? That's what you constantly need to be identifying and communicating value to your customers.
And that's why activity metrics don't work.
Nope.
100%. And back to Chad's point about looking at your book of business and how big are the contracts? Because that's absolutely true. Like if you've got someone who's paying you like, I don't know, $100 a month or whatever, like that might not be the one you want to go after. You might want to go after the ones that are paying 10,000 a month or something like that. And this also brings me, just made me think, like when you talked about that, Chad, that made me think about like these, CSMs who don't know how they stay sane, that have like these books of business that have 300, 400, 500 clients in them. They're like, well, I'm meant to be proactive to some extent. How do I do that? Right? That's insane. But
You're
I
not
would
good.
say,
You're
pick your,
reactive.
100%. But I would say if you
Yeah.
want to try to be strategic, pick the top 10 clients, right?
Yeah.
On value and maybe potential for growth. And then reactive on all the rest and
Yeah.
I would definitely time block in that instance. And then I would definitely try to do a cadence, but I wouldn't go crazy. I maybe once a month because that's more than any of the others are going to get.
Yeah.
You're not a
It's so
CSM.
frustrating.
You got a
Yeah.
400 customer book of business, you're not a CSM.
I
You're
know
a client
exactly,
support
but
agent.
it happens all the time,
I
Everywhere.
know.
all the time.
I know.
Yes.
Yes. I think going back to the question about segmentation and is it effective? I mean, a lot of it is in the organization, right? And the organization, it depends on how you work with sales, right? Because sales sometimes have their own segmentation and they
Yes.
have their own definitions of what a CSM does. Oh yeah, everybody gets a CSM. Oh yeah, oh they'll meet with however
Like
much
Oprah.
you
It's like the
want.
Oprah show. Everybody gets a CSM.
That's
And
right.
you
And
get one,
so
and you get
You get a car and a
and
CSM. Yeah.
yeah, and so one of the unfortunate parts for CSMs is that a lot of it comes down to their leader. Is their leader actually a good marketer? And what I mean by that is like, are they marketing within their organization what their customer success team actually does and what does it not do? And is that very clear across the organization? So if you ask a random salesperson, hey, like, what is a CSM? What do they do here? Well, they do everything. Like they do support. It's like, no, then you fail. So that's just part of, and it's hard. I have challenges too, but even just little things like, you have a meeting with your team. Do you publish those notes in a public place where people can read them? And so just those little things that you can do to market what you're doing, the challenges that you have, creating cross-functional relationships, those things are really important. Cross-functional meetings. That's part of improving segment and why segmentation is so important.
Awesome. Let's get to the next question here, which by reading this question may take us to the end of our webinar. Anthony asks, 100% agree that every meeting with the client should be effectively strategic. The last thing we want as CSMs is to be time suckers. In the case that is an expectation that we meet with clients regularly, say bi-weekly, monthly, what are your best tips to make those recurring calls as effective as possible? How can we best use those calls to begin laying framework for success plans, business reviews, etc.? Chad, you want to jump in on this first?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is like when you go into the call, before you go into the meeting, what do you want to accomplish? Like ask yourself that question. Don't just throw a generic agenda. What do you want to accomplish? And if you don't know what you want to accomplish, then you shouldn't have the meeting because it's not effective for anyone. So I think
If
that's
you
the
don't have
first
an
thing.
agenda, if you send me a meeting request without an agenda, I'm declining it.
But even it's an agenda, it could be like go over new features, discuss issues. What do you actually want to get? Do you want to resolve a particular item? Do you want to get a customer to use a certain feature? Like your own objectives might be different from what the customer wants, but that's okay. But at least have a sense of like what is it you're going to do. Then the second thing is based on what you want to do, create some questions around that. So, for example, if you know a customer is underutilizing a particular feature and you know that's important to their outcome, then you prepare some questions like, I see that you're trying
Why
to
aren't you
achieve
using
X.
this?
That's right. And
Right?
but doing it in a way that ties back to their business. Like I see, we talked about this. This is being an important objective for you. And I've noticed that you're not necessarily using this part of the product. Maybe you can just give me a little bit more information as to why that's the case. So asking that open-ended question. So coming prepared with questions. And then we talked about this, the uncomfortable question. Asking the question such as, let's say, and this is like a Bob London type question, if a competitor was to call you up today, what's the chance from 1 to 10, with 10 being for sure, that you would take that call? And just asking like a really like, sticking the finger in there a little bit on the side and saying, hey, like, what would you do? Like, how would you answer that question? So anyway, that's what I'd recommend. And come
Cinthia,
with a point of
Patrice,
view as well. Yeah.
you got anything to add?
I mean, I think my only thoughts would be very similar to the question I had already answered about like not tracking activities versus outcomes. And so I think in an effort to make your meeting as effective as possible, similar to what Chad was talking about, you've got to meet the customer where they are and understand what it is that they want to talk to you about, right? And so if you understand them and you surface up topics that they're going to be genuinely engaged and excited to talk to you about, that's where you can make those reoccurring meetings very exciting. And they need to be dynamic, because if they're reoccurring and there's just like a static agenda, it's not going to be effective.
Know your audience. Give them a reason to show up. Maybe even in the invite email, tease something. Hey, this is what you're going to get when you're going to show up. Know your audience, but you also need to be prepared, as we've all said here, not just to ask the right questions, but to say the right things, because your C-suite executive and your middle manager and your end user, even if they're a power user and happen to be a champion, all have different definitions of success. And you need to speak their language.
Yes.
Awesome. Anthony, thanks for the question. Chad, if you could hit the done button. Got another question from LinkedIn Live. I have a bad habit where I can't seem to leave things unread, so I struggle not responding immediately. Any tips to overcome that? Chad, you want to jump in here? I already gave him a suggestion about the send later button, but Chad, what have you got?
Yeah, I'd say like the way I look at anything that comes in, it's like if it's the 2-minute rule, it's like, can you respond right away? Respond right away. Does it need a response at all? If it doesn't, don't respond to it. And then if it takes a longer response, you can use some sort of like remind me later, and then and set it for a time when you've designated to respond to these longer type of things. So that's just a general approach. And think about this, like whenever you respond to something, you're going to probably get a response back. So do you want a response back? So if you send response on a Sunday or late at night, like you're going to get a response back, most likely. So just think about that before you respond.
Just delay your response.
Well, that's a good point, Chad.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Chad, too, because if you respond on weekends or at night, that sets the expectation with your customer and your peers. All of a sudden, they're like, "Oh, but Chad was always answers at night. Like I sent you an email, you didn't respond." So that's another way to kind of like not, manage expectations is definitely outside of hours. I wouldn't make that a habit.
Send later. every mail program, every CRM now has send later.
Today's takeaway: send later.
Send later. Exactly.
No check-ins. No check-ins. Send later.
Right. We don't need the bell ringing and the
Yes.
Yeah, it's because you condition. And what you end up doing once again is you end up creating your own problem. You create the problem that you're trying to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything needs to be responded to right away. Not everything is urgent. Not everything is priority one, right? So don't create the problem. Send later, time boxing, right? There's some really good tactical things that you can be doing. But tactically, we've reached the end of today's session. So I want to thank our guests for sharing their valuable insights and experiences. Your contributions make these discussions truly meaningful for our community. Thank you all for my Northeast contingency of OGs. To our audience, thank you for your active participation. Share your thoughts about today's session on LinkedIn by tagging myself, our guests, or Success Hacker. We love hearing about your takeaways. Mark your calendars for our next and final CS Mastermind of the year. And we're going to be announcing, by the way, a new format starting next year on December 17th, when we'll talk about preventing burnout and maintaining work-life balance to finish up the year all together. And finally, let me leave you with this. Great customer-focused individuals know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to find them. And that's why we created this series. Have a great rest of your day and month. Have a great Thanksgiving break next week for those who celebrate, and we'll see you in December.